Greetings, YouTube visitors. Well, I came across an article today, and I'd like to read it, by Joseph Stepansky. Stepansky is a freelance reporter and writer who's covered major breaking news stories across the United States. And the article is called, "What is National Concealed Carry Reciprocity?" If passed, the law would force every town to honor gun laws of the most permissive states for people from those states. All right, now a lot of liberals are against the right to keep and bear arms, while the conservatives, such as the National Rifle Association, tend to be Second Amendment advocates, the right to keep and bear arms, which is guaranteed by our Constitution. I'm not going to get into all the ins and outs, pros and cons of it, just to read this article and make a few comments. All right. When Jeffrey Scott Pitts opened fire in a crowded liquor store off a Georgia highway in 2015, killing 2 men, Todd Scott, a civilian inside the shop, pulled out his gun and returned a volley of bullets. Pitts fled. Quote, "I believe that if Mr. Scott did not return fire at the suspect, then more of those customers would have been hit by a gun." Unquote. County Sheriff Eric Levitt said after the shooting, according to local experts, quote, "So in my opinion, he saved other lives in that store," unquote. Scott's story and others where firearms were purportedly used to thwart the attack has been cited by many in a growing movement pushing for more people to be allowed to legally carry guns in more public places across the United States. Exactly. Now think about this. I've often thought about the incident in McDonald's down in San Diego years ago. I can't remember what year it was, but I think something like 15 or 20 people were killed, or shot and wounded. Now, if some person came into a McDonald's and nobody was armed, well, guess what? That person would be able to perhaps kill a dozen or two dozen people, especially if he had a semi-automatic weapon. But supposing one of McDonald's patrons was able to carry a gun on him, what would happen? Well, as soon as he heard the shooting, he would take cover and take the gun that he had concealed on him, or that was, openly viewable, and he would shoot that shooter. Hopefully, well, just wounding him, but possibly killing him. Whatever would be necessary to stop his attack upon these innocent people that are in McDonald's. All right. The fact that one person would have a gun and could take cover might mean the saving of many other lives. Now, this is just common sense. It's like in the old Western days, some bully, some criminal outlaw comes into town and starts shooting up. Well, most people had guns back then. And if they could take that guy on the horse out, who's firing his weapon at innocent bystanders, that'd be the end of it. So I really don't see what the fuss is all about. If we go by the Constitution, we have the right to keep and bear arms. But of course, we have a lot of incidences and false flags in the national news media, such as the one in San Bernardino, and a lot of other incidences over the years. Actually, the last several years. I can't mention them all right now. I have to research them out. They don't come readily to my mind. But you'll notice that Obama and Hillary Clinton were always, immediately after such an incident like that took place, they would harp on the need for stricter gun control laws. Of course, because they want to outlaw guns, basically, even though they want to keep them for themselves and their bodyguards. Liberals like Dianne Feinstein and Barbara Boxer are basically hypocrites. Anybody who has servants or private security on their property or premises who's armed, but yet they come out and say that the general public shouldn't have the right to keep and bear arms, is a hypocrite. Continuing this article. "We're fighting for people's rights to carry the firearms and other weapons they need to defend themselves," said John Boch, I think I'm pronouncing that right, B-O-C-H, the executive director of Illinois-based Guns Save Life, an organization that vows to defend your right to defend yourself. Botch was just a few years out of college when then-President Bill Clinton signed into law a temporary ban on assault weapons. Botch says he saw it as an attack on the Second Amendment. So he picked up the phone and called the NRA, the National Rifle Association, and became a member that day. And now works as a gun advocate and self-defense trainer. He says, let's face it, Donald Trump, and to an even greater extent his son, Donald Trump Jr., is very strongly part of the gun culture, said Botch. Donald Trump, I'm guessing he's one of the first presidents who ever had a concealed carry permit, unquote. A week before the election, the Trump campaign appointed Botch to a Second Amendment coalition tasked with advising him on gun issues. It is chaired by Donald Trump Jr. and Christopher Cox, the chief lobbyist for the NRA, the largest and most influential gun lobbyist group in the country. The coalition is comprised of several NRA board members, gun manufacturers, gun rights advocates, athletes, celebrity gun enthusiasts who support the right to carry, protection, and will defend the right to carry, personal protection, and will defend the Second Amendment, unquote, according to a Trump campaign press release. Priority number one for the NRA, which endorsed Trump and spent $30 million on his campaign, is national concealed carry reciprocity. Trump supports the policy. Well, that's a good thing in light of some of the other things that Trump has been doing, such as firing some key individuals who were basically pretty good people, from my understanding. Priority number one. Many states require gun owners to obtain permits to carry a concealed weapon with varying levels of restrictiveness. Some don't require permits and allow any gun owner who meets an age restriction to carry guns, so-called permitless states. If passed, the controversial law would mean every town, city, and jurisdiction would have to honor the gun laws of most permissive states with regards to gun owners from those states. Opponents, including elected officials, gun control groups, and an association that represents police chiefs from the 50 largest cities in the United States, say the legislation would undermine laws that make the public safer. But gun rights advocates say, as in the case of Todd Scott in 2015, that more civilians with guns would mean more people would be equipped to fight against gun violence. Quote, we're going to allow Americans to defend themselves with a lot less hoops they'll have to jump through to exercise their Second Amendment rights, said Botch. And let me come down a little bit further. Unwinding gun control. During the campaign, Trump vowed to fulfill a laundry list of gun rights proponents' wishes, including ending gun-free zones in schools and military bases and appointing a pro-Second Amendment Supreme Court justice. Yeah, you know, gun-free zones are not good either. Except perhaps in a court. You know, I think that's a good thing. A lot of criminals come into a court. Can you imagine if they were carrying a gun on them? They might shoot the judge, and this is probably why they started that. But other than that, schools, why shouldn't a teacher be allowed to carry a gun? Some idiot comes on campus and threatens to shoot some kids or take somebody hostage. If the principal or a teacher had access to a gun, they could readily defend their students against a would-be attacker, a would-be murderer. Common sense again. If we have gun-free zones, though, you could be out in the middle of a park and some idiot pulls out a gun and starts shooting somebody. Guess what? You pull out your gun, you're in violation of the law because it's a gun-free zone and you're not supposed to be carrying a gun. So really, my thinking is that we don't need gun-free zones. That's just another way to... I mean, the Founding Fathers never talked about gun-free zones, did they, in the Constitution? They never talked about... And then the question about, do we need a permit or do we need to do background checks? No! No, we don't need background checks. Why should we? The Founding Fathers never stipulated that in the Constitution. This is just another way to control people's right to keep and bear arms. Think about it. The article goes on and says, "We hope that President Trump will uphold his promises and do what New Jersey politicians won't," said Alexander Rubin, the president of the New Jersey Second Amendment Society, referring to national reciprocity. Quote, "Being able to defend yourself is a natural human right which has been codified by the United States Constitution." Amen. A 2008 Supreme Court decision reinforced Americans' right to own guns, but acknowledged that the Second Amendment is not without limits. There have been challenges to state laws on carrying a gun in public outside of gun-free zones. These have failed in lower court, federal courts, and are now in appellate courts, not yet having reached the Supreme Court. You know, it's a little bit like free speech zones, you know, where you need to get a permit to speak, to hold a protest, or to preach on a college campus. Why should you need that? Again, it's an attempt to control our freedom of speech rights. So, for that reason, I'm against them. Those who carry a gun across the wrong state border, whether wittingly or not, can face criminal weapons possession charges and stiff sentences. 30 years ago, most states either had no concealed carry allowed or concealed carry under strict conditions. Now every state allows concealed carry in some form, said Robert Spitzer, the chair of political science at the State University of New York at Cortland. Starting in the mid-1980s, the NRA began to push in state legislatures to modify those laws to make it easier to conceal carry. Now they're onto the federal government with national concealed carry. About 8 million people in the United States had concealed carry permits in 2012, according to a Congressional Research Service report. There are about 14.5 million concealed carry permits in the United States currently, according to John Lott, an independent pro-gun researcher. Well, I mean, we could go on, but I think that suffices to cover most of the article. More could be said about this, of course. The last paragraph says, "A lot of times you hear the gun lobby say a concealed carry permit is like a driver's license, but the reality is this is not anything like a driver's license," said Watts. "There's no training, there are no test requirements, it's not verifiable. If the NRA were actually pushing something like a driver's license, we'd be having a different conversation." Yeah, well, you know, the liberals always want to put restrictions on things, and they want more government control, basically. They want, like Tim Allen. I don't know if you've read or seen any of the latest videos about comedian Tim Allen, who happens to be a conservative and probably a Christian, who believes that God created his body, that it didn't just come about by chance, like the evolutionists believe. But, you know, he gets ridiculed, and he talks about the persecution in Hollywood, because Hollywood's controlled by a lot of liberals and the Jewish element and a lot of and the gay mafia. Let's just be honest. The homosexual community is very influential in Hollywood. People like David Geffen, a homosexual producer, and a whole lot of other people. Incidentally, did you know that Barry Manilow just came out as being homosexual? That was a shocker. That was just yesterday, I believe, or the day before. And I used to listen to a lot of his music when I was younger. But a lot of these people are coming out of the closet now because it's more politically correct to be homosexual, even though God says it's an abomination. It's an abomination for man to lie with mankind as with womankind, and vice versa. For women to lie with women as they would with men under proper conditions. Another thing I discovered about this article, which is really interesting, is that Reagan, who was pro-gun, who was shot in 1981, as you know, 10 years later, 1991, signed the Brady Bill, which was anti-gun and put restrictions on guns. So Reagan sort of became a traitor to the Second Amendment. And to think that I voted for him, the only president I've ever voted for, by the way, was Ronald Reagan. Yeah, I'm dating myself, aren't I? Well, I could have voted for Carter, but I didn't. Yeah, you know, Reagan wasn't everything he was cut out to be. He increased the federal budget, and he was a Republican, by the way. So that's why I'm saying, if you follow my thinking, you'll know that it doesn't matter whether you're a Democrat or a Republican. What really matters is whether you're a liberal or a conservative. Because both parties, political parties, have been controlled. It's a false left-right paradigm taken over by the global elite or the deep state. But what you need to know is that most liberals believe in more government, conservatives believe in less government. And we have a lot of Republicans who aren't conservative when it comes to the war machine, the military-industrial complex. They want more military spending, and that's what Trump campaigned on, remember? I'm going to make America great again. I'm going to make our military powerful. Well, you have to have a powerful military, but why are we policing the rest of the... Why are we acting like the world police? I don't know. Because it serves their agenda to create a one-world government. That's what it serves. And now, I will talk about the attack on Syria by Trump a little bit later in another video. So I hope you enjoy this, and may the Lord richly bless you. Till another edition.